Thank you for joining us for this discussion on the use of cold hardy palms. This is a very broad topic, and there is far too much information to possibly cover everything. So what we have decided to do is to focus these presentations on sharing what we know about how to consistently achieve good results with palms, and set aside, for the time being, explaining why our methods and procedures work so well. Using this format will condense the presentations and leave you with actionable information that you can put to work to grow your success with palms.
We have two more people in the waiting room.
Being hosted by George Nottingham, the founder and president of Groundworks of Palm Beach County Incorporated and Groundworks, Texas. During the past 35 years, and on 7 or 8 days out of 10, George is in the field on one of our farms or out on a client's site learning from our palms. The knowledge he has amassed is a product of these decades living and working with the material under real-world conditions, and via this webinar series, he is honored to share it with you. Upon request, participants of these webinars will have no charge access to downloadable professional recommendation documents and specifications that set forth the methods, procedures, and concepts discussed. During the webinar, we will have muted all participants. However, your questions and interactions are vital to the experience, so please, if you have a question, put your hand up by clicking that button and type your question into the chat. Once the initial presentation is completed, George will do his best to answer your questions in an open discussion forum. Thanks for listening. Here's George.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm George Nottingham with Groundworks, Texas, and Groundworks of Palm Beach County. The discussion we're going to work our way through during these next 6 webinars has to do with what actually happens out in the field. I call it super simply put because there's a lot of technical information, and if we go too far into all of that, we end up putting each other to sleep. For the most part, my opinion is that too many webinars present information that's important, but that we just can't use out in the real world to help us earn a living. This super simply put format, so the first time around, you have to excuse me, is designed to deliver truly actionable information that you can actually use out in the field to achieve success with palms. This first webinar is going to be an introduction. It's going to talk a little bit about what we do and how we do it. I'm also going to introduce you to some of the more commonly utilized cold hardy palms. And then as we work through the follow-on webinars, I'm going to actually take you out in the field and I'm going to show you the things that we talk about, the palms in application. I'm going to show you different things like strapping methods, a whole bunch of things that we do in the field that are actually fairly simple once you see them, but that you can practice either on site or if you're a landscape architect, that you can write specification language that will help the contractor understand what you're looking for and then how to succeed. The goal all the way around is to ensure that when you're planting palms, hopefully they're ours, but when you're planting palms, you're achieving real success on site. And as a result of that, ending up with absolutely beautiful material that just by being there grows your business. This is the webinar schedule. These webinars will be available online as well, after the fact. But if you attend the webinars, you'll have access to free downloadable documents that aren't actually part of the webinar. Those documents are professional recommendation documents that we prepared, that we utilize ourselves out in the field for training our staffs, and then that we also share with clients. But normally we charge for that information. Because you're a participant in this webinar, you're going to have free access to that. So we're really glad we had an opportunity to come. As I said, this is our first go around with this. We're going to learn as we go along. Any questions or comments that you have will be deeply appreciated. Probably one of the most important things that drives our business here at Groundworks, as well as your business when you're using palms, is that question, why use palms in the landscape at all? In markets or environments where we have occasional freezes, the notion that we can use palms is one that many people just don't understand. I have had just hundreds of discussions with professionals on the design side, as well as with contractors. And oftentimes I find that they believe that there's really only 1 or 2 cold hardy palms, sable palm, comes to mind. But the truth of it is that there are actually quite a few varieties that are very cold hardy. By incorporating those varieties into the plant palette, you create real diversity out on site. And that diversity leads you to a place where if we do have a disease issue that comes along, or if there's an insect issue that comes along, and it affects some of the plant material, because you've got a lot of diversity going on out there, you're not going to see a big change in the aesthetics of that landscape. That's very important to your client, and as a result, it's going to be very important to how the whole site looks down the road. This picture is just a great example of what you can do with palms in a nighttime setting, and frankly, at least from my perspective, it's just absolutely beautiful. This is a Medjool Day Palm out in the landscape. This is a southern landscape. You can see there's foxtails in the background. Obviously, those wouldn't be palms that you would use. That's a foxtail right there. You wouldn't use that in a cold climate, but the Medjool Day Palm is one that works great. These, I'm sure, are palms that everyone's familiar with. This is the Washingtonia filibuster, and that's a Windmill Palm. And again, these are in landscape settings where the use of palms may or may not be something you would commonly or normally think to do. But when you add those textures to the landscape, they make a heck of an impression. What can you say? I mean, this is the kind of thing that this is a very, a winterized, if you will, type of landscape. It's probably, I'm not exactly sure where this is located. I believe it's in Dallas. But the use of this Mediterranean fan added just a touch of tropical flair, and giving that to your client is something that they will definitely appreciate. What we're going to go through right here is kind of a short refresher on some of the cold hardy palms that are available. And obviously this is Phoenix canariensis. We produce these in the field in Alvin, Texas. I'm sure there are other people who produce them as well. Our palms, probably what separates them is that they have been through significant freezes in their lifetime. And this is the upper pictures anyhow. This is what they look like today. That was when one of them was young, but this is what they look like today. The material is stunning. It's true that when you have a teens freeze, so long as the palms are established on site, yes, you will lose a few of the fronds. They may brown some, but they'll grow right back out. We call the palms pedigree because they actually do have a pedigree to the seed stock that we use to create the crops. In this scenario, these 6 foot clear trunk Canary Island date, it's just a massive presence on site, and it's something that it's really hard to find a client that doesn't like, unless they just don't like the use of palms at all. That's more commonly what you would expect to see with canariensis. This is our nurturing facility in Alvin, Texas. Not sure exactly when this particular picture was shot, but these are canariensis that range in age from 25 to 40, 45 years old. We collect these out of existing landscapes. They're not produced in the nursery because they just take too long. But this is commonly what people see or think of when they think of a Canary Island day palm. This is Phoenix Celestrous. Now, we also produce these in the field now in Texas, and we're going to, in follow-on webinars, we're going to talk a lot about Celestrous, about some of the disease issues that they have issues with, but then also about their growth habits and about their flexibility and their durability in landscapes where occasional freezes are the norm. The palms can be absolutely gorgeous. They make just a stunning presence, but what separates them from Medjool Day Palms or Canary Island Day Palms is the cost. The cost is not as high. You can put Celestrous on the site for about 70% of the cost of a Medjool, or about 50% of the cost of a mature canary. So it's something you do want to know about, you want to be aware of, because it's the kind of palm that you can make a real statement with and do it in a market where occasional freezes occur. Not just an application, use of a small Celestrous in front of a home. Again, it's blending a Celestrous and a Windmill Palm into, and a Mediterranean fan palm into what is otherwise a market where palms one may not think you can necessarily use them. But the truth is there's significant durability and flexibility with these varieties. That's the Medjool. I'm not sure whether or not each of you has had an opportunity to use Medjools. Phoenix dactylifera medjool is one that we're going to cover in detail in one of the follow-on webinars. There's a lot to know, but probably the most important thing to know is that they're a very, very simple palm to use. Extremely durable, extremely cold hardy, very resistant to disease, and they make a statement that's just plain stunning. This is an inventory area. Again, this was, I'm not sure when the picture was shot, but we stock a significant number of medjools. Most commonly, we stock them with the thatch on, like you see here. This is what they look like after the trunk has been what we call classic cut. Our competitors, I think, call this diamond cutting, but we call this a classic cut. The look is, well, it's stunning. But when the material is in holding and when it's out in the fields, this is how it looks out in the fields. You know, what can you say? I mean, the impact that this material makes on site is just unlike anything else. They're just so darn strong. And I like this picture because whereas these are all medjools, right here we have a Celestrous. And that Sylvester, that blends fairly well. What it allowed this site to do was to make a pretty significant investment in putting these medjools on site. But because there was a long piece of property to dress, they brought the medjools across the front in the centers of the drive, and then the Sylvestris are down here on the other ends. So it was a really pretty neat application, but the impact the palms make is just plain stunning. This is something that everyone needs to get to know. And that's a certificate of variety. And like I said, we're going to go through a little bit more about this in one of the follow-on webinars. Very briefly and simply put, within the genus Phoenix, there are species, and one is dactylifera. That medjool, that's a dactylifera. The subvariety, that's where it gets important. And the subvariety in this case is medjool. However, there are other subvarieties. And this is something that landscape contractors and landscape architects really need to be up to speed on. This is not an unhealthy Phoenix dactylifera deglenor. This is just what they do. This, on the other hand, is a medjool. These are all medjools that were planted at the same time, not the same site, but approximately the same time frame as these deglets. And this is what the medjools look like today. This is what the deglets look like today. For many reasons, the rachises, the frond spines on deglets, tend to be a little weaker than the frond spines on medjools. Now, in this case, the seed was taken out of these medjools, probably in preparation for hurricane season. That's another thing we're going to cover in a follow-on webinar. And in this case, the seed wasn't taken out. And what's happened is the seed is laid on the rachises of these fronds, pushing it down. The significant difference, though, is that this palm is one that really doesn't like humidity. It'll survive and it'll do okay, but the canopy will always be thin and wispy. It is far more susceptible to a common foliar disease called graphiola. And if you end up getting degletnors on site when you meant to have medjools, then down the road you're going to be answering questions that are very uncomfortable. Probably a difficult aspect is that when they arrive at the site, straight out of California or Arizona, the trunks look pretty much the same. And with the canopies tied up, it's very difficult to tell the difference. So requesting and requiring, look at this, this is another great example of a medjool that's actually planted next to a deglet. There was a medjool here, it had been struck by lightning, it was replaced, I'm aware of this site. And when the contractor put it in, he thought he was planting a medjool, but the vendor sent him a deglet. And this is what the client ended up with. In any case, that issue makes getting a certification of variety very, very important. And all it does is tie the invoice number and the actual genus and species and subvariety of the palms to that invoice number. That's all it does. Once you have this in the file, and even by requesting this from a vendor, you pretty much eliminate the potential that you're going to end up in this situation. The only reason you ever could really end up in this situation is simply because there are so many more of this degletnor variety out in the desert being used to produce dates. Incidentally, this variety is the one that when you go to the store and you buy date cereal or date bread or any of those products with dates in it, commonly the dates that are in it are the degletnor date. It's a small, hard little fruit, works great for big chopping machines, whereas that the medjool date is large, big as your thumb, very, very moist, a lot of sugar, gums up the machines. This palm is produced in the desert. Incidentally, all these are produced in the desert for the fruit, but the Medjool fruit is produced as a finger date. In any case, because there are so many more deglets than there are Medjools, it's not a difficult thing for, well, someone who's out there selling palms to tie the heads up on these and ship them to you, charging for a Medjool, but sending these instead. It's happened so many times. This helps avoid that, and it's a very, very important thing to keep in mind when buying date palms. Obviously, if you're buying them from Groundworks, or at least I hope it goes without saying, if you're buying them from Groundworks, you don't need to worry about this. We give certificates with everything, but where you're getting a great deal, question the great deal and ask for the certificate of variety. This is another item that we're going to cover. I'm going to go over briefly right now, but it's one of the key things that we see out on the site that causes performance issues. I think everybody knows that pH is a measure of how acidic or basic water is. Super simply put, if you have a significant pH imbalance between the irrigation water and the moisture in the root system or in the palm, on the day the palm goes on site, you're going to instigate a performance issue. What basically happens is you'll install palms and they'll just stand there. They won't live, they won't die, they won't really do anything. They'll slowly fade. You'll lose one frond, you'll lose another frond, they won't appear to be growing. You'll be wondering what the heck's going on. They'll slowly begin to get a little bit discolored, and then all of a sudden one day you'll go by the site and they've started to grow. Well, what you're seeing there is a slow process of acclimation to the pH imbalance. Doesn't have to happen. It's easy to avoid. Being aware of the pH values in the water, irrigation water, that's easy. It's as simple as getting a pool, swimming pool test kit and testing it. Being aware of the pH, the pH and the moisture in the palm, that's a little bit more involved. But if you're dealing with a reputable vendor, they should definitely be able to give you that. And if they can't, they can get it. And it's sensible to ask for it, especially if you're unsure of what you're dealing with pH-wise, or if you don't have a lot of if you don't have a lot of experience with palms. This single thing is the issue not three-quarters, but half the time that I find out on site. Palms are installed, there's a significant pH imbalance, and performance suffers. This is another palm that we're going to spend time going through. It's the Mediterranean fan palm. You may or may not be familiar with it. Shamrops humilis comes in green as well as in silver, semi-silver. The silver is Shamrops humilis cerifera. We produce these palms on the farm in Alvin, and they are mega cold hardy. You can take these palms and install them into markets where you have low teens freezes, and the palms won't skip a beat. They are absolutely amazing. They are extremely slow growers. That's one thing to be aware of. The palm in this picture has about a little more than 4 foot of trunk. It's almost 15 years old. Now, as they grow, obviously they're going to get a little bigger. I think the biggest that I've ever seen are probably 13 or 14 foot of trunk. Those palms are 45 years plus old. But sizes that we would commonly use in the landscape are things that are similar to this. They make great accent palms. There are no disease issues that bother these Mediterranean fans. And it's a palm that you can use pretty much anywhere where you have full sun. The only thing they really don't like, they don't like a lot of shade. They'll take a little, but they don't like a lot. Very drought tolerant, really cool palm tree to consider using. That was that same palm. And this palm actually, oddly enough, pure coincidence, this particular palm is on a truck right now going to a job site up in Tomball. This is Beautia capitata, the Pindo palm. This is another one that in one of the follow-on webinars we're going to go over. The Pindo is a seedling. They're all grown from seed, as all palms are, other than the jewels. As a result of being seedlings, they have many different genetic characteristics. So Pindos can vary quite a bit in trunk caliper, in frond length, and frond color. As you can see here, we have different methods of preparing them. Classic cut the trunk. We do field cutting, looks like this. This is just what the inventory looks like out in the field. And I included this picture only because it's extremely rare to find a Pindo that actually has 2 tops on it. So that's actually the only one I've ever seen do that. We can't normally make that happen. Beautia is one of the most tropical looking but cold hardy palms there is. This palm will definitely work in zone 8. We've seen them up in zone 7. They'll take freezes all the way down into the very low teens and even just a little below that, as long as it doesn't last too long. You get a 17, 18 degree freeze. I kid you not when I tell you that these things look like they like it. It's just amazing. Out on the farm, this is our farm in Alvin. This inventory here that you're looking at has been through multiple mid-teens freezes and 20 degree freezes. So you can see they're just plain tough. Big, heavy calipers, just absolutely stunning inventory to look at. We're going to go through that more in one of the later webinars. And then, of course, with windmills, oh yeah, Melissa makes a good point. We do have thousands available. There we go. Anyway, this is a windmill palm, and again, I'm sure it's something you guys are all familiar with. If not, Trachycarpus, we grow the fortunei. There are actually other seedling varieties. There's a bit of a mishmash available because the seeds, the palms will cross-pollinate. But windmills make a great accent palm. They are cold hardy. You put them up in Dallas, no issue whatsoever. Really, really tough. Not a big canopy. The canopy's only 6 or 7 feet across. We're going, again, in one of the follow-ons, it's just an introduction. We're going to go through some of the applications for using these windmills. And of course, you can see what we did here with the trunk. When the trunks are manicured, they look like Santa Claus brought them. They're just absolutely stunning. Chinese fans, Libustona, are one of the most versatile but underused palms there are. There are many Libustonas, but the one that we produced in Alvin is Chinensis. It's a Chinese fan palm. They will commonly grow singles, but you'll occasionally see doubles and even triples. They palms make a really big frond, very, very thick canopy. Cold hardy, you know, the book says zone 8A. I've seen them above that. Again, they'll take low teens freezes. The canopy will brown out in a really bad freeze, but they grow back very, very quickly. So, you know, again, this too is not a real expensive palm. So where you need some real presence and where you don't have a big budget, Chinese fans are just a fantastic palm to consider. This is something that we're going to touch on as we move through the series, but it's something that's very, very important and super simply put. When field-produced palms are dug for transplant, the entire root system that is cut dies back. I don't know how well you're aware of that or how many people are aware of that, but it's really important. The entire root ball, this happens to be the root ball of a Medjool Day Palm, but this entire root mass is essentially dead. The root ball acts primarily as counterweight. Because palms do continue growing roots throughout their entire life, up inside that root ball, all the way up inside, there will be you know, some young root tips that had not grown out far enough to be cut when the palm was dug. And as a result of that, up inside the root ball, there will be some live roots. But for the most part, when that palm comes off the truck, after it's come out of the field, that entire root system is dead. We generally just trim all this off before we send it to the site. That's very relevant because of what happens afterwards. When you install palms on site, field-grown palms on site, what happens essentially is the palm, this is, as you can see here, it's just a mulched bed. This, I think, was a Celestrous that was planted, 7 or 8 months before I shot this picture. I brushed the mulch away, and you can see the capillary root system. Palms produce a capillary root system from the upper 18 inches of the root ball. The primary root system that we cut dies back. The capillary system regenerates during the first 30 to 40 days on site, and then it populates the upper soil layer. This is probably one of the most important things you could possibly know, because if you have a dry down during that first 30 to 45 days on site, when this capillary system has just begun emerging, the dry down only needs to get down to 6 or 8 inches to desiccate the entire emerging capillary system. Well, that capillary system is a product of stored carbohydrates and moisture that are in the trunk on the day the palm arrives on site. The palm doesn't really have the ability to take in a significant amount of moisture when you initially install. We give you recommendations that ask you to thoroughly flood your palm installations during the first 30 days after planting. And the reason for that is because of those young root tips that are up inside the root ball that you have to get water to. A little bit of water on the ground is not going to get up inside the root ball, so we ask you to flood during the first 30 days. But root regeneration is primarily dependent on what's already in the trunk. And once you've used it up, once the capillary system has grown out and you've utilized what was present in that trunk, the net result is if you let that root system become desiccated, you don't have a lot of ability to grow a new one. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to end up with a dead palm tree, but you will definitely push the whole process backwards. So during that first 30 to 45 days on site, your most important focus has to be on nurturing this capillary system, and being aware that it's there, right there at the surface, is very, very important. This was an example we did just for this picture. This is a date palm. We had washed away the soil at the upper part of it, and then we packed it with a hydromulch material that we call Echo Tree. We left it for about 30, 45 days, and then we broke some of that off, and I wanted to show you what actually happens. This is the emerging capillary system. During the first 6 months on site, the capillary root system is literally the only root system. It takes the palm, so say 3 to 4 months, depending on the species and the time of year. It'll take the palm 3 to 4 months or longer to develop a fully aggregated capillary system. And once it's done that, the palm replenishes from the capillary and then begins growing new primaries. Those are the big fat roots like your finger. Once you're at that point, a little bit of dry down is not going to hurt you if it happens. But until you reach that point, a little bit of dry down will literally turn the clock back and change the entire dynamic, as well as the mid and long-term results. So nurturing that capillary system is literally the whole ball game, and it's something you absolutely need to be aware of. I know everyone loves fan palms. We grow a lot of fan palms. We don't grow Washington or Robusta. What I did was cross-pollinate and grow what are called Filibusters. They're crosses between the California fan and the Mexican fan. They're a little heavier caliper. They have a little bigger frond. They're a little more cold hardy, but they are definitely fast growers. They will definitely produce a lot of fronds that'll hang down, and they are known to be messy palms. This material is fabulous for roadway applications and places where you're going to have a drought scenario. They're extremely sustainable. Don't need a lot of water at all after establishment. But it is a palm that you should be aware of because they're very, very inexpensive. So if you've got a budget issue, you need something that'll look palmy, look nice, but you don't have a lot of money to spend on it, then consider using Filibusters. This is a palm that I'm not sure whether or not you guys are exposed to this yet. We're going to spend some time on this as we move through the webinar series, but this is a mule palm. And what a mule palm is a cross between a cross between a queen palm and a pindo palm. We actually cross-pollinate them, and then we grow the young seedlings. We hope that we get at least one good hard freeze, because that hard freeze will thin out all of the palms that have a significant amount of the queen palm's genetics. Queens won't take a teen's freeze. And what we end up with are palms that look like this, that we can put into a backyard or around a pool, put somewhere into a landscape, or maybe it's not going to be easy to get to it once the once the landscape is complete, and produce just these fantastic tropical aesthetics, similar to a queen palm on steroids is a good way to look at it. But do it with a palm that you don't really need to worry too much about after the fact. And I do believe that takes me right down to the end. As I said, the palms that we just went through, we're going to spend some time going through in more detail in the follow-on webinars. The next webinar, we're going to be out in the field, and you're going to see some of the things that we actually do to create success. We'll show you how to do them so you can show your own people how to do them. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Stop sharing, George.
Oh, stop sharing, George. Okay. So we're still learning. There we go. Everybody's muted, Pete.
I have asked everyone to unmute, so I'll try it one more time.
Hey, you guys, there's a button down there that'll allow you to unmute if you would like to unmute. I might be able to unmute myself. Oh no, it's asked to unmute.
No, you're unmuted already, George.
Okay. Maybe nobody has any questions.
And you got any questions? Jacob?
Hey, I must have done a good job. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for coming. These webinars will be recorded and we will be posting them on our website. If you have any questions, of course, you can always just give us a call. The office number is 800-753-5127. I'll say that one again, 800-753-5127. The webinar schedule will also be posted and we'll send it out. We're going to get out into the field next time and look forward to doing it. So thank you all very much for coming.